Hello, dear listeners. Paddy here. Today's Absolute Prose highlight is one of my all-time favorite episodes, and that is Matan's Villains episode. And it's one of my favorites because it contains what I think is the best segment we've ever done, and that is the Great Precipice Villains Draft. What is a Villains Draft, I hear you ask? Well, stick around for the last third to find out. It's good. It's good. You're going to enjoy it.
Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Welcome to the Pros and Cons podcast, a podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers. And today your host is Matan Elul, and I've got quite the trinity here with me. I got Alex Eldridge.
Hey, yeah.
Paddy the Boylan.
I'm going to start going by Paddy the Boylan. Yes. Hello, I am here.
And Phoenix Raig.
Hello.
We got a really fun podcast, a podcast I have been wanting to do for a while. And if you read the title, you know today we are going to discuss villains. But before we jump into that, I do have to say something pretty big has happened to our dear Precipites. And Alex, how was Canberra? What were you doing there?
It was great. It was so much fun. We went down and we got to go to the Aurealis. I always want to say Aurelius, the Aurealis Awards, which are basically the premier speculative fiction awards in Australia, I believe. We went down there and hobnobbed and rubbed shoulders with a bunch of writers. A lot of horror writers, actually, which was great. I love that, being a horror aficionado and writer myself. But yeah, lots of great, fantasy and sci-fi and everything. It was it was super cool. Didn't win. Neither Matan or Phoenix's story won, but it was amazing just to be there.
But they were nominated.
They were definitely nominated.
We were nominated.
Yes.
So this
Confirmed.
would be our time to shamelessly plug the new Mythic, our anthology that has recently come out, that has been twice nominated. That's what, 33.3% of the stories are nominated? That's pretty high.
Yeah, it's a pretty good ratio.
Batting pretty high.
With that being said, boys, what have you been reading? What have you been writing? How's it been going? Let's start with Paddy.
I was just going to jump in anyway. That's really rude. I haven't been reading much, but I do have on my desk, and I want to start tonight. You guys have mentioned Save the Cat a bunch of times before, a book on screenwriting that's much revered, often talked about. Like if you Google great books on writing, Save the Cat's likely to come up. I got Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Have you guys heard of that?
It's not written by the same guy, though, is it?
No, apparently it's not. I don't know how that works. Presumably it's part of the Save the Cat brand, but yeah, same thing. Buff and novel writing. Apparently very good. The only complaint I've heard is some of the novels were a little bit obscure that she uses as examples. Whatever. I'm really looking forward to getting into it because I've been struggling with the structure of my book that I'm writing a lot. And I'm hoping that this can help. So that's what I will be reading.
Nice. Very nice. Phoenix, what about you?
I also have not been reading a great deal. Well, just because I've been very, very busy lately, working a lot. So I haven't been getting around to much reading, save for like maybe a little bit of Harry Potter or a little bit of something here and there. I'm juggling like 5 books at the moment. So as a result, all of them are moving very slowly, but it's still nice. But what I did want to say is I think that this is the first time I'm going to mention an album I listened to recently because it feels very applicable. But clipping. Hey, do either of you know? Do any of you know clipping? Clipping's amazing.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. That's the name of the artist?
He plays Thomas Jefferson in Hamilton, the original Broadway cast.
Okay.
But he, as well as the French guy whose name is escaping me. But anyway, his album, I have it right here, Visions of Bodies Being Burned. He's the whole album, if you love horror, the horror genre, like it's basically like listening to a series of horror stories. He's a hip hop artist, he does rap. he's an amazing storyteller. So many of his songs have a full narrative in them, and like it's a lot of words. He like amazing lyricist, like incredible poetry. Ironically, so I write a lot of poetry. Ironically, I don't listen to a lot of poetry. I'm not like a big fan of reading or listening to poetry. I just have fun writing it sometimes. But this was like, ooh, like it's a visceral album. It was amazing. So Visions of Bodies Being Burned, so many bangers in that album as well. Like so many that'll just be like, ooh, like he's got so many, he plays with beat amazingly.
This is the first time anyone's mentioned an album in the what have you been
yeah,
digesting?
This is the Precipice first.
That was
Breaking new ground.
that was a glowing recommendation. All right,
Mhm.
Alex.
I have been recently reading through the second in the Mech Warrior Legends series, which is like, if anyone knows anything about the BattleTech universe, it's super nerdy, super like just big robots blowing the shit out of each other. It's very like very technical and stuff, but like weirdly good character arcs and storytelling, and the world building is just phenomenal. Like it's just, you can tell this has come from a universe. So I read the first one of that, just being like, I've listened to one of these. It was kind of rubbish. I'll listen to another one. But this one is like the first one ever done. It's by a guy named, I think, William H. Keith. And it's just really surprisingly good. It's like, it's just standard, military sci-fi fiction. But it's like, yeah, this is like the characters are all really drawn. It's just good. So I was pleasantly surprised by the first. And the second one is living up to as well. It's, good conflict, good character conflicts.
I remember when I read the first Halo novel, like someone dumped it in front of me saying, you got to read this. And I was very skeptical. Actually, really good science fiction, really well written. I guess these big franchises do get good writers.
Yeah, well, this was in 1986, but I mean, every now and then, I guess, they hit one out of the park.
Yeah.
Wow. Myself, I'm still reading Bird by, I hope I'm saying her name right, Anne Lamott. It is another book about writing. It does veer more into the philosophical side of being a writer. I feel like it's more of a pat on the back of the head, like it's going to be all right. That's the vibe this book is giving me. Like, writing sucks. I know. Keep doing it. That's pretty much how I would describe it so far, which is a refreshing change because while there are a lot of great books about writing, like Save the Cat and Stephen King on writing and many others, it does feel like at some point they tend to overlap. So if you read a lot of them, kind of feel like you're reading similar advice. With that being said, I am starting to eyeball The Mirror and the Light, the third book in the Wolf Hall trilogy. We're making slow and gentle eye contact from across the room, where I have made it clear that he is next on my list, and he has made it clear that he doesn't believe me because I have said that in the past. We shall see. With that being said, let's jump right into the topic. And today we're going to discuss villains and what is a villain and why do we need them so badly. Now, we are a writing podcast, and it's true that it is mostly a novel-centric podcast, but I believe we discuss things that are relevant for comic book writers, for film writers, screenwriters, all sorts of mediums. Phoenix, I know you have been quite experimental in storytelling mediums yourself, but villains persist. Villains and antagonists are sometimes different. Antagonists could be not necessarily villainous, simply a rival for a similar goal as our protagonist, our hero, but making villains good is something that is very tricky. And I think that early in our writing careers, it is such an important pillar of our stories to have a compelling villain. So before we go into how we go about writing our villains, what our techniques, our strategies, our process, first I'd like to hear from you guys. What are some of the villains in literature or TV that you guys have liked, and what caught you?
One I'll say, who is a villain. It might be better to couch him as an anti-hero. So I'm not sure. Are we gonna like maybe we'll have to like pass that out? But it's one me and James have talked about before. You could kind of call him a villain. Is Harold Laudner from The Stand? Just very very complex, very like nuanced and like embattled within his psyche. It's just a really really good turn through it. I don't know if it's totally fair to call him a villain, but definitely an antagonist.
For the sake of our readers that
Yeah.
might not be familiar with The Stand, what is The Stand about, and what's this character's role that makes him an anti-hero or villain, antagonist,
Well, I don't really want to
opposition?
ruin the plot because there
Broad
is
strokes.
it is a little bit of a spoiler, but the idea is basically there's this kid. He's like kind of a nerd. Okay, the world is like ended from a virus, basically. Like the last shreds of humanity are sort of finding their way across the globe to sort of converge in these different areas. And this is a kid who basically just is a nerdy kid who's basically been put down and kicked around his whole life. And it's his like growth into discovering who he is and what his relationship with the world is. And he sort of swings between these arcs of doing good things and doing bad things. And you don't really find out until the end which way he kind of goes. But yeah, he's just very complex, like just very complex, and you never quite are sure where he stands. So very ambiguous, I guess, is the way to think of it. Yeah.
Nice. I think it's good when we don't really know where a character stands. It keeps them very mysterious.
Mhm.
Sometimes they surprise us for the better, like Severus Snape from the Harry Potter series, where I think I'm trying to remember my impression as a kid, but the first 3 or 4 books, I was sure this is one of the bad guys. And then kind of had the rug pulled from under me. So, yeah.
She certainly sets it up like that.
Think of many
What about you,
examples
Paddy?
actually in fiction where you get someone who starts as a villain or perceived as a villain and then switches. There's probably a ton that I'm not thinking of, but it's an interesting conceit. The villain becomes another hero. My example is going to be Walter White anytime this is asked. Phoenix, I know you haven't seen
well
Breaking
done.
Bad. I'm going to try really hard not to give spoilers.
I can take my headphones off.
True, and maybe you should. Phoenix hasn't
And
seen
you can
Breaking Bad
signal
yet,
it.
much to his eternal shame, but
Wow.
he will rectify that,
What-
and he will love it, and he'll be one of us.
It's been 10 years,
Us.
Phoenix.
Yeah.
Since
I'm gonna
the
bully you into watching
finale.
it.
Yeah, it's so good. Kate and I had my
I'll
partner
All
just
right,
shrug.
watching it
Walter
again.
White.
It's because every step of the way you're with him. You don't might not agree with him, but you know why he's doing things from a material, like an in-world point of view, right? From the point of view of the world around him, the world he lives in, and from a personal, his own psyche point of view, it's really clear why he does everything. So even if you don't agree, like, all right, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess so. All right, you doing that evil thing? Yeah, okay, it makes sense. Doing that evil thing? Well,
It's
based on who you are, I
consistent.
get it. Yeah, it's really consistent. So by the time it ends, Phoenix, feel free to take your headphones off. Let's
All right,
just
here they go.
okay. By the time you see him for the full bastard that he is, you know exactly how he's got there. And it's almost like you look back and go like, wait, this is the guy we started with? You must do a double take. And it's like the change, it's like a frog in boiling water, right?
Yeah.
The change happens so slowly that
Paddy,
when you're boiled, yeah.
I really want to challenge you for a second
Okay.
because he's extremely villainous. I'm with you. But let's go behind Walter White's eyeballs.
Okay.
Who's the villain in his story?
Gus Fring. There's multiple,
Okay, there
but
we
I think
go.
Gus Fring he's another villain. I would argue that Walter is a villain, right? Even if you want to call him an anti-hero or something, he's a villain.
Yeah.
But he's not the antagonist. Again, the distinction's difficult.
He's
and
an
tricky,
anti-hero.
but yeah, sure.
An
well,
anti-hero is maybe it.
I think
Yeah. And the
anti-hero
man who
rhymes with
knocks
villain.
at the end.
Yeah. So that's me. It's almost like watching a show as the anatomy of a villain,
That's
right? Dissected.
excellent.
We're done, Phoenix.
That was a very. I love your choice, but I was surprised by your choice because I
it's-
gotta be honest. Somehow, Walter White and Breaking Bad in general did not come into my head when I was thinking about this podcast.
Okay.
Good
Some
one.
healthy disagreement is good.
Phoenix, who has
Yeah.
terrorized you?
Okay, so this isn't even like one of my top movies, but just in terms of a villain that really struck me and was like actually like I got nervous when they were on the screen. It is a movie. Was the villain in Leon, the movie with Natalie Portman? It's like she's very young in
Oh.
it. She's like 10 or 11 or 12
What's
or
the
something.
name of the film again? Sorry.
Leon. The
Leon,
French name.
okay.
Laon. Leon. It's an old movie, and the villain's played by oh, what's his name? The same guy that plays Officer Gordon in The Dark Knight, and
Oh, Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
yeah, he's
Sir
played by
Gary
him,
Oldman.
and he's a corrupt he's a corrupt cop, but like his introduction is like he's insane, and it's clear he's insane, and the way that they introduce him is intense, and then the reveal of him, because spoiler, like you don't know at the beginning that he's a cop, the reveal of him being high up with the police is like ridiculous, and suddenly like halfway through the movie you just get so much more nervous and like you don't know what's going on.
Is that the film where he yells out, "Everyone, bring everyone, everyone"?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay,
That's
That's
the one.
the one?
wow, that's the one, huh?
Oh, my God.
Amazing.
Gotta watch it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And,
memes have taken over. We hear about the meme before the
yeah.
film.
Yeah. And another one that I just wanted to shout out was I've shouted him out before, I think, but from The Raid, which is is a very fun movie if you haven't seen it. Highly violent, but like it feels more like comic book violent. Like it's just a lot of great like kung fu fighting scenes and stuff like that. But there's this one villain, he's like, so the villains are like the main villain and then these two henchmen characters. One of the henchman characters is kind of like the main guy's mad dog. And he's a very, very, very good fighter, and he just loves fighting. So while he works for the main character, he kind of has his own agenda. Like he'll prioritize a fight, then like his instructions will be to kill someone, and instead he'll bring them into a room and give them all, like, put their weapons aside, but let them get up, let them clean themselves off, let them do whatever they need to get themselves ready so he can have the fairest fight he can have, because he just loves the fight so much.
That's a cool
even though he
trope.
could have just executed them. So like I really fall for any villain that has like some sort of code or some sort of rule that they live by, some sort of really like higher power that's
Mhm.
that's governing their actions. I love that.
Have you guys seen or read No Country for Old Men?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah,
But
the
I
character
know.
Anton Chigurh, his code is so. Yeah.
Oh God, the coin.
Whoa.
Wow,
Yes.
that scene where so this guy walks into, I don't want to ruin, but he walks into a grocery store and basically he's got that makeshift weapon he made, and he tells the grocery store owner to flip a coin.
Yeah. What's the most you
And the
ever lost
grocery
in a
store
coin
fire.
toss?
Oh God, that thing. Watch it. I don't want to ruin it. Just watch the thing.
Yeah.
That's chilling.
Well, like Two-Face and Batman, I respect
Oh.
the hell out of him, because I'm
The
like, you know
code,
what?
yeah.
That's fair. He flipped it on himself.
Fli-
That's
Yeah.
Awful evil. It's a fun evil.
Got a
I
code.
was
yeah.
I wanted to I was going to shout out a book version of Gollum from The Hobbit, because that creep terrified me when he
Ah.
plays the riddles with Bilbo, and he basically
Yeah.
tells him, if you get the riddle wrong, I'm going to eat you. And me
Mhm.
as a kid, I was bloody terrified. That creature seemed so scary to me. In the movie, is portrayed as more of a pathetic creature. I mean, he could strangle you in your sleep, but something about the portrayal in the book before I had seen the movie, I imagined him so much worse. I imagined him as like this shadow creature that, all bones and anyway. But something you said about the rule, I was actually I was watching Matilda, the musical version, with my wife yesterday. And in one of the scenes, the villain is this headmistress. She's really nasty. She abuses the children. She one of the kids steals a piece of chocolate cake from her, and as punishment, she tells him, "You gotta eat the whole cake." And it's a gigantic cake. The cake is like 5 times the size of the kid. Everybody's horrified. They think it's gonna explode. Heroically, the kid pushes through and finishes the cake, and she tells him, "If you finish the cake, all is forgiven." When he finishes the cake, she just kind of stares at him and says, like, "I'm going to punish you anyway." And it was like, what the hell? You're breaking the rules. And I think that goes back to what Paddy and Phoenix said. When a villain has a code, there's something about them, no matter how bad they are, that almost kind of earns a bit of dignity from the viewer, I think.
Yeah.
But on the same page, the Trunchbull is an iconic villain. She's absolutely iconic. I'd say she is the definitive Roald Dahl villain. Actually, there's just like something so terrifying about the fact that she's the authority that she has. It's like you are in her world, and she can literally, like, she picks up a girl by the hair and like swings her around and throws her. And
Yes.
even though that's physically impossible, and the girl survives and is not terribly
Well
injured.
done.
Or she can put you in the chokey. Like, there's just something about being in locked in a room, like, with someone who is insane and who is allowed to do whatever they want. That I feel like that's the other side of that. That's there are no rules in here. The rules are my rules, and I make them up as I go. That is much scarier, I think, in a way.
Yep. There's definitely more of a terror element when we cannot really predict the behavior. I think has been the appeal of a well-portrayed Joker character. That unpredictability, when portrayed well.
Though even they've been portrayed by recent actors' name is escaping me. They have a code. It's a twisted code, but I'd say the Joker does kind of live by a code. It's like he knows what he's about. He explains what he's about. He's very authentic to himself. He wants to watch the world burn. He wants to sow chaos, almost like on a philosophical level. So yeah, he's unpredictable, but there's still an element of.
Sorry, is that the Heath Ledger version or the
the Heath Ledger version? Less so, I guess the Joaquin Phoenix version.
The Joaquin Phoenix version felt slightly more unhinged to me because it felt like he isn't in control of what he does.
Yeah, you're right. He was teetering on the brink.
He had a plan. Yeah. I wanted to ask you guys, because this is a podcast about writing. So when you decide I'm going to sit down, because I think it applies more to novels, because short stories, just by nature of their length, sometimes we might not have as much time to flesh out a villain as we would in a long form story, comic book especially. So when you sit down to write your novel, how do you go about the process of crafting your villain? Do you just like let the villain show up as an obstacle? Do you plan the villain in advance? Or when the villain shows up, like Alex, I know you sometimes kind of go with the flow and let the characters even surprise you sometimes. When the villain shows up, how much agency do you allow them, or what's your process really?
Can I just ask, just as a slight tangent to this and then come back to it, just as like a litmus test, can I ask what everyone's favorite villain in the MCU is? Just as a basic litmus. I'm not even a huge Marvel fan, to be honest, but I just think it's a good litmus test of where you stand on villains. I'll start. So my favorite is oh god, I can't even remember his name. The guy from the Black Panther movie. You know the one.
Killmonger.
Killmonger's my favorite.
Killmonger? His name is Killmonger.
Yeah, his name is Killmonger.
Okay.
Because he's just
I know what he does. It's pretty self-evident from the name.
Like, going back to what you said, he's got like a code that he follows.
Yeah.
And I like the complexity of it, and he has like legitimate justifications and stuff. And and that's that. I just quickly wanted to see where everyone stood in that. I know maybe it seems random, but I think it's just a good like litmus test.
Okay, Thanos.
Fair enough.
Because he's got a code and he's actually really complex, and in the twisted way, you're like, I get it, dude. I get where you're coming from. That always makes for an interesting villain, right? Where you can see their point of view, and even if you disagree, you're like, yeah, but there is a logical argument there. Not saying I agree, but yeah, I think Thanos was great.
I was actually gonna say Killmonger as well. But I've never actually thought about what my favorite villain was before, but Black Panther, I think, is my favorite MCU movie.
Yeah,
I need to watch that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be boring, but it is Killmonger as well.
He's just the best.
Wow, shit.
I literally, when he says, burn my body and throw the ashes over the sea, like my brothers who chose. It's been a while, okay? But anyway, his last line, I sobbed. I cried in the cinema because it touched me so much.
That's a good villain. I think that's always very effective. Not the only way to do a villain, obviously, but a villain where you care about them, that's powerful.
Yeah. Sorry to hijack that, Matan. I'll go back to your original question.
We love tangents.
Yeah.
So my process is, it really depends on what I'm writing. I tend to write from a very character-focused first thing. So I don't know if I deliberately do this, but I tend to find that the ways I come up with villains are the types of villains I come up with are skewed one of two ways. They're either very complex and like theoretically understandable, or completely irrational and basically just based off an entire emotion, like an Eldridge being of some description. But it's only one way or the other. It's either going to be totally simplified and completely just must feed, or like a nuanced, balanced actual character. Those are the two that I seem to have. I don't really do very well in that middle ground. I know I did try to do one once with
I don't want to spoil, but in one of your manuscripts, which will one day be available for sale, you have a really, really good, very powerful villain. Not because he's Thanos, he cannot break the moon with his hands, but in the dynamics of the story, he's got a lot of power over the other characters, a lot of influence. You know who I'm talking about? And he is a little bit unhinged.
Yeah. It goes that way at the end, I think, and that's something I want to reel back.
Towards the end, he kind of unbuckles his belt and goes the whole way. But throughout the story, he felt very rounded out in that I could see why he's behaving the way he's behaving. I mean, he's very eccentric, but I could see his motivations. He wasn't like a complete loose cannon for me.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm glad that came through. I haven't read it for a while, so I can't actually remember how well he does, but I seem to remember trying to flesh him out a little bit.
Phoenix, what's your process, man?
Yeah, my process tends to be very it does tend to be kind of like psychological. Like I take my own, like I take a scenario and I kind of sometimes it's a mixture of things. So like one thing is kind of like I'll write their, maybe in a scene I'll write their behavior based on like I'll look at my psychology and like how I know to rationally go about something, and I'll kind of take just the antithesis of that. Like how would if someone that like, you know, because I do a lot of the practice of like, all right, like what am I making a story about? What is like, did that person actually do something, or am I just, that's how I'm interpreting it, and like really trying to separate, you know, the physical events from my stories about them. So what if I had someone that just leaned full into those stories and just really was like really, you know, really in their head about something, and just like, so it's almost like a fun exercise of like how twisted can you go, like really just leaning into you know, the irresponsible way to you know, kind of go through something. That's like one thing that flavors some things, but mostly I do just tend to lean in general towards someone where you could see why they're acting the way they are, and it's more tragic. It's like, oh, like you have a guiding light, but your guiding light is based on some trauma. It's based on some event that you're pretty confused with yourself, and now it's currently driving you to do some pretty hideous things. But I will say, because I was thinking about that.
I just want to know, because that trauma that you described, that is the guiding, almost like this corrupted guiding light for the character. Is that trauma something you write, or is it just in your headcanon? Do you know about it, but it doesn't necessarily appear in your stories? Does it have to be, in your opinion, in the story, or is it enough that you as the writer are aware of it?
Both. In the moment, because I have like one main novel that I'm working on, and that one, the trauma is in the story because the trauma is crucial to the plot. Like the trauma source has another role, massive role in the story, and it just happens to be the villain's experience with this one thing that is actually central to everyone's experience. Another thing that I realized, because there was another book I was messing with for a little bit, I'm not anymore, but I realized the villains in there are a bit more simplified. The human villains in there are a bit more simplified. And I actually don't have, like, they certainly have some corrupting light behind them, but I don't have that in the story, and it doesn't feel necessary to me. Like, I don't want them to be that fleshed out. They are more just simple, like, kind of grimy, like Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings. It's like, you don't know what happened to him, but he's nasty. But then I realized, like, it's because they're kind of secondary villains. The secondary, they're villains that are corrupted forces, but the main force of, like, the main force that's acting against the people in the book is actually a natural force. It's something that is more pure.
Yeah.
So because of that, and I guess it's kind of like that in Lord of the Rings as well. You have Sauron, who's almost like a force of nature, versus Wormtongue, who's kind of like, you don't care about him. He's just something nasty in the world. And that's kind of a symptom of the world almost. So like, that's kind of what like that villain is. Yeah.
The symptomic villains, the symptoms of the greater.
Yeah. In fact, I got a whole point that I want to make later about that exact type of villain you're talking about, Phoenix, because I actually think that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paddy,
that's
how do
me.
you find your villains? Do you have them?
I don't tend to write many. This
Hmm.
made me think about, like, I don't tend to write a lot of villains, but what I do really enjoy is, like what you were saying, Phoenix, the, like, quote unquote elemental evil. It doesn't even have to be like an evil, but like a villain whose purpose in the story is almost to cast a darkness down on what's beneath it. Like Sauron does, for example. Sauron's not really an engageable character. I mean, you were saying, Phoenix, I think that in the books he's a more character. He's got like this aspect of fear and paranoia about him. But at least in the movies,
Yeah.
it's a force. It's like looking and seeing that there is a sun in the sky, and that sun is there casting its light, except it casts like a darkness on the story. I find that really an interesting concept. My favorite villain in that sense, this isn't my writing, but I think about this guy when I'm writing stuff. There's a book which James and I have read, we've talked about before, called Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, and there's a character in it called the Judge, or Judge Holden. Now, the Judge is this towering, huge man. He's an albino. He's completely hairless, but he's got like weird features, like very soft and small hands and feet, almost like a child, and a very babyish face. So already he's like very striking and unusual. And the guy is a genius. To quote the book, he is a character who, quote, excels in shooting, languages, horsemanship, dancing, music, drawing, diplomacy, science, and anything else he seems to put his mind to. So this guy is like almost uncannily intelligent, so much more so than anyone in the book. And he's always jovial, and he's always pleasant, and he's a great diplomat, and he's really charming. Except when this guy does evil, and this is a book with a lot of bastards in it, like it's a book full of villains. You'll be hard pressed to find someone who's not. He is the most cruel and despicable of them all, and he always does it with a smile on his face.
Wow.
There's the implication throughout as well in the subtext of the book that he might actually be some kind of supernatural agent of evil. He might be the devil, or there's other theories people write a lot about this book.
In that setting, Paddy, is that a realistic answer? Like in the setting of Blood Meridian, in that world building, is it a plausible thing?
It straddles the line. Like in a book that's starkly realistic, this is a character that is almost not, they're almost too much, they're almost too strange. This giant albino walking through the desert with this band of killers. Anyway, the point is he casts this darkness over the whole story, and even in a book full of villains, you've got this one villain in the corner who's, but no one's as bad as him. It's almost like the idea of Satan in like the Christian mythos, or Loki, the great antagonist. This is a long way of saying that I like villains that do that, and I'm really interested in that
But
idea.
it is interesting because I remember in your story, The Fall of Behemoth, which I'm not going to spoil here, it does feel like there's a lot of elemental antagonism, but we're not necessarily on the side of mankind, without going into too much detail. And I wonder, how much is Paddy the person the reason that you don't write villains rather than Paddy the writer? Maybe it's Paddy the person with his empathy and the way that you look at the world. That kind of, even though you enjoy reading about villains, as you just demonstrated, you don't seem to write them.
Not really, like in the
Do you think that if you consciously try to, what would come out?
Don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Probably, like Phoenix said, someone who's a product of trauma and a product of the world. I think that's more interesting and believable. And that's more a message I'd want to convey. Someone is quote unquote evil because the world was evil to them. I don't know. I think that's a more interesting message to put into the world.
My personal process with writing a villain is that I take two things into account. First of all, I completely agree with what Phoenix said. I think the trauma is a crucial moment of fleshing out why characters behave the way they do. And I try to give trauma to my non-villain characters too. I think that
plenty to go around.
There's plenty of trauma to go around. Some have it worse than others. But when I look at my villains, I have two approaches. One is, speaking of Save the Cat, is the obstacle approach. What character would provide the most challenging and engaging obstacle to what my protagonist wants to achieve? If his dream is to be an actor, maybe it's an agent that really hates him. If his dream is to be king, maybe it's the bastard son of another king that really wants the throne too. And stepping into that, a lot of times the ultimate obstacle for my protagonist is someone who almost mirrors them, almost like a dark mirror of the character.
Like a foil, right?
For example,
That's what the definition of a foil is, I think.
yes.
Yeah.
Exactly, but almost like a what if of the character. Take your character, and what makes them a protagonist is not necessarily that they're pure good, but that we like to think that they would make the right hard decision when it's hard. But the villain can almost be someone who has taken a different decision placed in a similar situation. The novel I'm working on right now, I have a father character, and he's not a very successful father. Financially, he's struggling. He's got drinking issues. People usually find him disgusting, pitiful. But deep down, he's got it right. His compass is at the right place. And when things really go to the worst direction, he will do the right thing, usually at the cost of his dignity and well-being. Whereas the villain, the mirror character, is admired, powerful, very respected, financially stable. People look at that character and think like, wow, that's someone we should listen to. But deep down, when they have to choose between what's good for them and what's good for others, 10 out of 10 times they will choose what's good for them. So that's kind of the mirror I try to do and show like they're similar, but their core is what distinguishes them.
It's like
what
villain
would they do?
Villain is structural device, almost.
Yes, definitely. But following Paddy, you said something so interesting about Sauron, because all of us, we write speculative fiction. We write in the genre, in the sci-fi, in the fantasy. And in our genre, it is, as much as we want to flesh out our villains and have them be three-dimensional, it's hard to ignore the fact that some of the giants of the genre, if you look at Lord of the Rings, we look at The Name of the Wind, we look at Star Wars, we look at Harry Potter, there is usually that singular all bad or 98% bad villain, whether we're talking about Sauron, Lord Voldemort, the Emperor from Star Wars. In Dune, we have a pretty bad guy, right? As the Harkonnen?
Yeah,
Harkonnen,
Baron
right?
Harkonnen, yeah. I just
So
watched it.
on the one hand, on the one hand, we want to say, we want our villains to, be traumatized, misunderstood, just don't go in the right path temporarily. But then we look at the greatest and most popular creations in the genre, and they usually have one of those. So what do you say to that?
I would say, I mean, look, you could always take a populist opinion and go like, well, that's going to appeal to the biggest number of people. But I think it's more that it is easier to see the light when you have a great darkness. I think that contrast reveals heroes and protagonists in a light that makes the contrast and the discrepancy that much more vivid. I think, like, if you compare Luke to, say, the Emperor, like, one is a paragon of virtue and innocence and naivete, maybe, but like heroism, right? And then the Emperor is just this scathing, crackly old guy. Yeah. And throughout all of the Star Wars movies, even from the first three, like, not speaking chronologically, but like episodes 1, 2, and 3, he never displays an inkling of not being evil. It's always displayed in duplicity and that sort of thing. He's always just pure evil. And by the same token, we never really see a bad side of Luke, aside from him maybe being a little bit impetuous, and but those are character traits that he works his way through. So I think that's it. It just provides stark contrast between those two opposing forces. Yeah,
it is just it is, again, it's a plot device. It's like the auger in your petri dish. It's like, all right, things in our world exist. Like in a petri dish, when you're setting it up, you put auger in the bottom. That's the sugar. Or whatever.
I thought ogre an ogre like Shrek.
Ogre in your petri dish. That's a great
ogre in your petri dish.
Wow, what is that? That sounds fantastic. Sorry, go ahead.
Writing that down. I was very proud of myself for remembering what it was called, auger. But anyway, no, it's like because in our world, obviously, there are things that we can't control, natural disasters, whatever, diseases they're just elemental conditions. Like, they're not inherently bad or good. And almost by making something so evil, it becomes almost innocent again. And then it just becomes you don't worry about them. The Emperor
Mm.
is just an evil that exists in the world, and because of that, you then have your conditions for your actual characters.
Mm.
It's like, all right, Sauron exists. Let's see what the characters do. Because the Emperor is also a backdrop, he gives room because he's holding the evil baton. Darth Vader is allowed to explore his full range of character because he's not the one holding the evil pillar.
I love what you said
so,
there because I
That-
really
that's
love
really
that
it.
about how the main villain allows the secondary villain. For example, Voldemort allows Lucius Malfoy to be redeemed.
Yeah.
Because if there is no Voldemort, then why is Lucius such an asshat?
Yeah. Or the Night King
No
in
one's
Game of
making him
Thrones,
do
right?
it.
No one's more evil than the Night
who
King. Oh, well, I haven't
and
read
who
the
does he?
books.
Yeah, okay. No, fair enough.
I mean, my point was, yeah, there's loads of villains in Game of Thrones, but the Night King is this arch over villain, always far away in the background, again, casting those rays of darkness. They're never really interacted with. They're more, an elemental force of nature. You know, they're a different
I like that
tier of villain.
I like that phrase, force of nature. That's,
Yes.
I think, because I can relate to that in some of the villains that I make. Like, if something becomes a force of nature, it becomes the very apogee of something that is villainous and evil and destructive. Then it's almost beyond reproach character-wise. It's almost like that's just what it is. It's like this thing just hungers to devour everything. It needs to destroy the universe because that's what it does. Like that's its thing. I think there's a lot of power in that as a concept.
Yeah. And there's a few characteristics of these sorts of characters. They don't often have a lot of dialogue. They're not often interacted much, except in like shadowy ways. And the Emperor, like Darth Vader and the Emperor interface through that hologram thing, but it's never like a dialogue. It's just the Emperor says cryptic things about what to do. They don't fill the same role as an active villain like a Darth Vader, as the ones that are out doing the evil. They're always in the background. And actually, I think if you have like one of those active evils, let's say if Darth Vader was just pure evil with nothing redeeming, and maybe in the first few movies he is, I don't think he'd work as well. I think those kind of absolute evils you were talking about, Matan, work when it is this background force that's not the boots on the ground evil. The boots on the ground evil should maybe have a bit more character, a bit more depth, because they're the ones that's going to be interacted with and have ideas and dialogue bounce off them, and you need to see the interesting ways that they interact with that, as opposed to just always laughing like an evil villain whenever anything happens.
We should have a spin-off on the orcs from Lord of the Rings called Meat is on the Menu, and see what where that takes us. I gotta say, I feel like especially in our genre where you have so many trilogies that let's take the Mistborn trilogy. I don't know if anyone here has read it now that Ali's not in the chat, but you have. So the Mistborn trilogy starts with this seemingly pure elemental godlike evil, but then there's kind of the law of escalation. We see it a lot in anime, right? The villain of Arc 2 has to either be responsible for the villain of Arc 1 or be stronger than the villain of Arc 1. Like there has to be like, you go from Vegeta to Frieza. Okay, you kind of go from Frieza to Vegeta. Okay, speaking of great villains, I love Vegeta. Anyway, in the Mistborn series, you start off with this like godlike entity as your villain, and he looks irredeemable. But then in book 2, you kind of discover two things. One, he wasn't the worst this world had to offer, and two, maybe he wasn't such a bad guy after all. And sometimes that feels natural. Sometimes that feels like a retcon, like a retroactive modification made to justify the trilogy. And that's something I think writers should be careful with, especially if you hope that your series will last a few books. Think about your villain.
Possibly the same with, sorry to interrupt. I mean, it's possibly the same with Darth Villain, right? If he does have moments of redemption in the first movie, at least, I can't think of it. I mean, maybe the fact that he's Luke's father, but it's as the films go on that we actually start to learn that this character who is just this force of evil has complexity.
Off of the kind of what animes do a lot, where it is that like, and then there's this guy, like right after they beat the one villain, it's like, but then there's the the next form or whatever it is, like the difference, because it's like, you know, Thanos is kind of the same thing in the sense you have all these villains and Thanos is kind of the thing behind everything.
He's the meta
And they
villain.
kind of the meta villain.
Meta
Yeah,
villain.
they introduced them.
Is that what it's called?
But
The
they-
meta
No, I
villain?
just made that up.
It's a good time though.
Okay.
We're the meta villains as the audience. We're creating the villains.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Real quick, speed round. Don't overthink it. You got 10 seconds to think about it. Favorite anime villain? Go.
Oh,
Frieza.
I
Frieza, probably. Yeah.
haven't seen enough.
Frieza, okay.
Yeah, I love Frieza.
I'm drawing a hard blank. Oh, the guy in Cowboy Bebop, Lucius, I think his name is.
Oh, no, I want to redo mine. The clown in Cowboy Bebop. The floating creepy clown. That's my favorite.
Oh, that guy's
Uh,
hectic.
Yeah, he's
Pass.
Everybody gonna see
Pass.
what
I don't
everybody's
do-
gonna see what a filthy casual I am, but I'm gonna say Pain from Naruto because I watched like 5 mainstream anime and I love Pain. You know, he's going through so much. So yeah. Anyway, all right. I promised
wait,
you
but-
guys. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that the difference is like between the episodic villain where you're just adding another one on top as soon as you beat the other one versus the one that you like Thanos is like it's because he's introduced earlier as the puppet master and then they use that as an excuse. Oh, like all the subsequent villains become tension points to build that one villain up, but because they're introduced
Yes.
earlier, it creates significance as opposed to just like they don't touch on the next phase of villain at all, and then suddenly only once the other one's dead. And then this guy, like that's where it's
Yeah,
like
like
there's no
Boo.
tension built around it. It's
Yeah,
just
what-
like I didn't know this thing existed.
Yeah.
But on Boo, and do you guys know the term power creep from
Imagine.
like
Yeah,
games and video games? Power
Yeah.
creep is, let's say there's a card game called Magic the Gathering. You may have heard of it, fellow nerds, where, you know, like editions are released and new cards come out, and sometimes cards are more powerful. But there's a tendency for cards to just become more powerful and more powerful and more powerful. And the power keeps creeping up. And because you never want to release an edition where things like are less powerful than the last one, that feels lame. The power keeps creeping. So, like, after Thanos, where do you go? And like, I think Boo is kind of a symptom of that because to me, Boo is really freaking lame. And he's meant to
Yeah.
be like the most powerful villain yet. So when you have this constant arms race of, but we need bigger villains, I think you're kind
Yeah,
of
and-
setting yourself up for failure a little
Shoot
bit.
yourself in the
And
foot. Yeah. for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and
Who-
they have to
who's
be
Boo?
different colors.
Yeah, exactly.
Boo, imagine Boo.
Exactly.
Majin Buu
No,
from
you don't,
Dragon
man.
Ball.
You're better off.
Oh,
Yeah, he was the guy after Cell, you know. But
Yeah.
I tuned out after that as well. I was like, nah,
That's-
I'm done. I'm fine. Like, this is all right. Perfect Cell was the ultimate villain. It's fine.
Mhm.
What?
Yeah, Frieza.
Well, no, he wasn't.
He wasn't. He wasn't actually. But I was like, I'd had enough.
He had
I was
a-
like, okay, you've
that-
capped out here. You know what I mean?
That sexual tension with Goku just killed it for me. You know?
Wait,
Just
what?
go into a room and bang.
What?
And maybe that was the abridged version. Sorry. Team 4 stars. Shout out. Watch it. It's
All right,
delightful.
Yeah. I want to watch that. actually.
Guys, I got to push
Yeah.
forward. I did promise you guys a game.
Hmm.
We're going to play a game. There are usually games
Excellent.
when I host.
Yeah. That's,
All right, so here are the rules of the game. Welcome to the Great Precipice Villain Draft, where Paddy, Phoenix, and Alex are going to assemble an all-star team of villains. Woo! I will
Oh
then
my
make a
God.
nice little thing with it, and we'll let our viewers or our friends decide who won. Okay, so you're not going to know who won until after the podcast, possibly months if we delay in publishing it. Anyway, here are the rules. Just because he chose Thanos and the other guy chose the guy from Phoenix Wright Attorney at Law does not mean you win. Power scale doesn't decide who won. The question is not who has the strongest team of villains, who has the best team of villains in how they're written, how fun they are, how engaging they are. So don't use power to decide, oh, I'm just going to take Galactus and I'm going to win. That's not what we're doing here. Rule number 2, you cannot choose 2 characters from the same universe. So if Alex chose Venom, nobody can choose another.
Damn.
I don't know if I should
Spider-Man.
limit it to Spider-Man villains or Marvel villains, because I don't want to just have a comic book shootout. Let's make it hard.
Yeah.
Only one Marvel villain, only one DC villain. All right.
Okay.
I
Cool.
like it. I
So-
like it.
So if someone chooses Gollum, Sauron is off the table. All right. Here's how we're going to decide who starts. Alex, your name starts with an A. You go first, and then we got Paddy and Felix. I should have come up with a better way to decide, but I'm a dictator.
Okay. So I just picked a
to
villain.
rub salt into the wound, you call me Felix.
So- Sorry, Phoenix.
Felix Raig. He's your shadow, your foil.
Yeah, he's my foil.
So
Okay.
Alex, you pick first.
Okay.
And Paddy, you pick second. And so we go into all of you had 3 picks.
Okay.
Alex.
I like this.
Wait, last thing.
Yep.
Last thing.
Mhm.
Chemistry counts. Your villains are a team.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, okay. Fun.
Don't put villains that I'm pretty sure the Joker and Darth Vader are not going to be cool with each other.
So wait, what's the so it's just who are you choosing who wins out of the team of
No, it's going to be a popularity contest.
Okay,
I'm going to put
cool.
three pictures on Twitter,
All right.
socials, and see
All
who
right.
gets the most.
I'm good.
That's
Okay,
good.
cool.
Excellent.
Well, my
Alex, let's
first
go.
villain. Can I do it? Can I do my first villain now?
Yeah, go ahead. Go
Okay,
ahead.
my first villain is the Overlook Hotel from The Shining.
Oh, wow.
Through the building.
Whoa.
No. If you
Wow.
read that book,
Okay.
that is the villain of that book.
Wow.
No, fair.
Jack Torrance.
Fair.
Jack Torrance is
Wow.
he's a tragic hero. That's what he is, and the Overlook is the real villain. Of
I
that
choose the darkness that lurks within mankind.
book.
No, it's fair. Overlook Hotel.
Wow. Alex, that was a home run to start with. Yeah.
Thank you.
Paddy, how are you going to top that?
All right.
You're fighting a hotel.
Yeah.
And
Lucifer.
real estate prices are going up. So
Lucifer, the Morning Star.
what? Lucifer,
Yeah, for what
Where?
IP though? Which
The
IP
Bible?
is Lucifer?
like the Bible, Lucifer?
like human
Lucifer,
mythology. Yeah, the
TM,
Bible, the
TM.
IP that is like Judeo-Christian.
Wow.
Thought. Yeah, Lucifer.
Wow.
I mean, you could pick what's his name as well,
It's
the
got it.
famous poet.
Okay, no
Dante.
one can choose God then. All right, the Bible's taken.
Yeah, the Bible is taken.
God is the ultimate villain.
I'm
Damn.
just looking up this person's name.
Wow, you guys are really outdoing my expectations.
Yeah, the power creep is already.
Yeah, I feel like the power has crept.
The power has
we should have
crept.
started lower.
Okay,
Wow.
I might, maybe you'll know this villain's name, Alex.
Yeah.
It's a Cowboy Bebop villain. It's the person who's the bioterrorist.
Person?
That makes the
It's
the
been-
monkey.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, so no, I
I'm googling them.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it as the person who is the bioterrorist, and we'll fix it. And he's
Yes.
got a monkey.
But,
I love your
but,
games,
But
Matan.
what's
It's so
like
fun.
one thing we should know about this guy for those who haven't seen?
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
Is that
first of all, it's a woman, and
Okay. Uh-huh.
Oh, is that in the space
she's
station?
very, yeah,
Yeah,
she's
I
very chaotic. She's extremist, and she's helping to fight for the environment, but as a result, she becomes a bioterrorist. She's like, people aren't changing their governmental laws, people aren't doing enough, so I'm going to create a bioweapon and threaten the planet with it. And if they don't do anything, then I'm going to
Damn.
Nice.
wipe them out.
Has
I'm
there
gonna kill
ever
all
been
of
a
them.
less likely trinity than Lucifer, the person who is a bioterrorist from Cowboy Bebop, and the Overlook Hotel?
No, I don't think that has.
So they're all battling it out.
They're all
All
bad.
right, Alex. Call
Okay.
reinforcement, Alex.
Okay. My second draft pick is Dracula.
Okay, let's
Ooh.
go. So Dracula is staying inside the Overlook Hotel. That's part of that.
Oh, is that how it works? He's
No,
like-
it can be
That's how
outside.
we're
It can
gonna
be in the
imagine it.
parking lot.
all right.
Yeah.
It's hanging out in the parking lot.
Yeah, he's just outside smoking.
I gotta say, I really
Oh no, this
like
was in the
the
70s, so he can be
combination
smoking in the hotel.
Which combination, Phoenix?
I really like the combination of the Overlook Hotel and Dracula. Like,
Hey, it kind of
Dracula
fits.
seems like he'd kind of thrive in there.
Yeah, that's a good combo, Alex. All right, Paddy, who's going with Satan?
Yeah, I'm going to choose Hans Lander, who is the
Oh.
surprisingly
Hans?
charismatic Nazi from Inglourious Bastards.
Can someone tell me how to spell his name?
Charismatic.
H-A-N-S.
Oh, that's a great pick.
I'm going to
Yeah,
say
that's cool.
L-A-N-D-A because I made a note of it before, so I'm hoping Google
It's
got it right.
bastards. It's with an
L-A-
E. I
I
think
think
they
it's
did that so
A.
it's not a curse.
It's-
Bastards.
It's
I'm
just
pretty
an
certain
E,
of that.
yeah, but that's, it's all G.
Well, that's a great pick.
Yeah, and I've
he's
got a rationale
terrifying.
for it.
He's
Satan. If Satan is the Professor X for this X-Men team, Hans Lander is more the Gambit. He's the more relatable, kind of fun one. He's a fun Nazi.
How is
He's a fun Nazi.
well, as far as Nazis can be fun, I think he's quite fun.
Nazi.
I think that's actually what makes him really effective. Like, he is an utter scumbag. Be like, God damn it, why he's so likable? Oh, I
Well,
just got dead air
have
from
you
that.
seen him
Wow.
eat
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought he was disturbingly charming. Well, does that
disturbingly is the
Charmingly
word.
disturbing.
Yeah,
What was his whole thing?
so
though?
many adverbs. Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
Good
we
job,
are spec
Paddy.
fic writers, in fairness.
Yeah. Phoenix, what do you got?
Yeah. I am gonna pick the Joker from The Dark Knight, specifically
Okay.
that version of the Joker.
Okay.
And the person's name is I actually forget the person's real name in the Cowboy Bebop, but they refer to her as Mom.
Yeah, I remember.
So
and
Mom.
there's the two like bruises as well, and they're like, oh, Mom.
Yeah, Mom, no.
Yeah, I remember.
All right, we're down to our last picks, guys. So
Okay.
make it count.
All right, my final one are the creatures from Josh Malerman's Bird Box. So for anyone who doesn't know, basically the world, it starts going, like, people start going insane. There's this theory going around that they're seeing these things, and these things are turning them insane. And basically everyone has to walk around with a blindfold on so they don't see these creatures.
I heard about this.
So they're just roaming
we get
around
to see-
Yeah.
in the backyard.
Alex,
of-
do we get to see?
Oh
the
no, you
creatures?
never get to see one. No, you never get to see one.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So
you
you
do
got-
get to.
you got-
There is one like very close by. It does it's like touching one of the characters. It's very.
You
very-
have an immortal vampire,
Yep.
a hotel that pretty much makes people go crazy and kill everyone they love, and creatures that, should we see them, it would be the last thing we see.
Are you
That's your
detecting a theme?
Well, I would really not like to meet any of them. Like that's a formidable team of, oh my god.
Yeah. They go. The creatures send you insane, and then you kill yourself. Is basically what happens.
But you have gone pretty pure evil. Like, you got a team
I think
of
so.
Sauron.
I think so. Yeah.
Dracula's got some
of
depth,
nature
right?
rather
Isn't,
than complex character.
I haven't read
Yeah, he
Dracula,
like-
but doesn't he's got nice clothes and shit.
Yeah, he's pretty nasty though.
Okay, I haven't read
Pretty mean.
Dracula.
All right, Paddy, the last piece of the puzzle.
It's a tough one, but I think I'm going to go with the T-1000 from Terminator 2.
Nice.
So for anyone who hasn't seen this, I don't know why you haven't seen Terminator 2, but it's a robot. It's made of liquid metal. Personates people, like it'll take on the form of a person and then act like them to get information and stuff. It's really menacing. It's really menacing.
It's super
Yeah.
creepy.
Fun fact,
Paddy, I feel like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, fun fact about the casting. I saw an interview with the guy that played it. You guys can all remember what this guy looked like? Kind of a
like
the reason why
back hair.
but the reason why they picked this guy who's kind of slight and like lithe looking, Arnold
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger, who plays the other Terminator, who's now a good guy, is this big hulking like muscle bound guy. It's like, okay, well, we can't have that. What's a good counterpoint? So one of the writers said, well, we need someone that looks like a dancer. We need someone who is like lithe and light on his feet and has like sharp looks, and that's why they cast this guy, which
Very cool.
I think makes a lot of sense.
He's really good. He's a great actor.
I feel like if all teams, Phoenix hasn't finished, but if all teams go to like a team building activity, they go for drinks or treasure hunt, I feel like your team would have the greatest chemistry. Like, they would have a great time. Like
Hanging out
Lucifer,
with the
Hans
devil.
Lander, T-1000.
I appreciate
They'll
that.
have some beers.
Audience,
T-1000
take
will
note.
have a few-
Matan is endorsing my selections. Just
Wait,
note it.
Phoenix hasn't finished.
Just note it.
Alex's team makes me, makes me deeply uncomfortable and scared. Your team's like, I'm gonna die, but I'm gonna die with a smile.
Yeah, it's gonna be a party.
Phoenix, what do you got?
Yeah, my last pick. I feel like I had one before, but then I forgot them. But I'm liking my last pick now. I'm gonna go with Pride from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
I'm googling
That's,
them now.
Brotherhood is important to put in there, actually, because in Full Metal Alchemist there's a different Pride.
It's a different series, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, it's a creepy kid.
So,
So-
you
Yeah.
got two anime characters and a comic book character. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Tell
so
us.
Mom and the Joker are both very chaotic and both very smart as well. They have their own guiding principles, but they have that same chaotic energy that I think like they'd actually jive pretty well together. They might like if they could get on the same if they could get on the
Hmm.
same path, like they'd be very hectic.
Yeah.
But then because of that, Pride is actually very calculating and very cold, as well as very powerful. He's very deadly. And he's actually kind of used to dealing with kind of less than manageable people. So like
Less than manageable.
I feel like Pride would kind of be the begrudging manager of the two, as well as they'd kind of manage themselves, because Pride would calculate, but at the same time, the Joker and the Mom can't actually be steered. So they kind of, in a way, rein in Pride a little bit. So they kind of, it's kind of a quirky team.
Yeah.
But I feel like
you've got some thematic consistency. I just picked a bunch of cool names, but this makes sense.
I get it.
I think they're a dark horse to win it, just because of the, they kind of fit each other.
Yeah.
Paddy, I hope your choice doesn't get us in troubles with some religious groups, but
Lucifer from
What are they going to say? He's not a villain? Like, what?
Yeah, he's a fallen angel, man.
There's
Totally.
nothing controversial about this.
All right. Thank you guys for participating in the Great Precipice Villain Draft. I will make a social media post, and when we publish this, we'll see who has won. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. As always, we like to finish with a quote. I gotta be honest, we got a pretty depressing one today. It is by Oscar Wilde, and he says this: "We are each our own devil, and we make this world our hell." Now, if that quote made you uncomfortable, join the club, but it is very true. We are sometimes our own biggest foils, and as always, it was a pleasure to see you guys. To our dear listeners, I'm reminding you that the new Mythic is out, and it has that beautiful Aurealis sticker, and it's ready to be purchased at any given time. Also, if this comes out before Supernova is happening in Sydney in the end of June, we are going to be there. Our very own Alex and Ali are going to be there with a stack of beautiful books and some artwork for you to purchase. And as always, if you enjoyed listening, please leave a review wherever you consume your podcasts. And nice to see you, as always.
Hey, see you later.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.